When the First World War ended, the Luo men who returned home didn't just bring back rifles and boots stained with fire and mud. They brought back questions. Questions that would make the village elders pause mid-sentence, that sparked whispers among children about a world beyond the lake and the cattle pastures. A change was coming. The Luo people were awakening. Not with violence, they had learned the hard lessons of patience. But an awakening was happening nonetheless. But first, the young men and women of Luo land had to learn to read the world, not just the familiar patterns of the lake's waves. The mission schools arrived in Nyanza like curious, and sometimes awkward, guests at a Luo homestead. Places like Masinu School and Alliance High School, with their strange blackboards, uniforms, and rules that made the elders shake their heads in disbelief. At first, Luo parents were deeply suspicious. They'd say, "It's all well and good for a child to learn English, but can he still count the cows with precision?" This would make the children laugh, the elders would join in, and the missionaries would just frown, not quite getting the joke. But the Luo are clever. They quickly learned to navigate the missionaries' strict rules without losing their own identity. A boy could recite Bible verses by morning and then by afternoon, find himself in a lively debate with the pastor about the importance of traditional rites, all while wearing a mischievous grin, polygamy. The missionaries frowned on it. The Luo families simply shrugged. Christianity. It was adopted, sometimes for the prestige it brought, sometimes out of genuine faith, but it was always tempered with deeply held traditions. A cleverly worded insult, delivered with a smile, could silence even the most rigid and dogmatic teacher. These were boys and girls who could quote scripture from memory, recite European history, debate fluently in both English and Luo, and still, with unerring accuracy, describe how to build a fish trap or properly measure a prize bull. Humor remained absolutely central to their identity. A Luo student returning home from Masinu for the holidays might tease a village elder saying, "I have learned all about heaven, but my cow still knows the way to the best pasture. Better than any missionary knows the way to God." This subtle, polite, and humorous resistance laid the foundation for the political awakening that was just round the corner. The Luo were learning a vital lesson, that wit, education, and faith could coexist without ever surrendering who they were. They were becoming modern, but they were doing it on their own terms. By the mid-1940s, the world far beyond the shores of Nyanza was changing at a dizzying pace. Europe was exhausted from another devastating war. Across Africa, a new spirit of defiance was stirring, and the Luo, armed with education and a wider worldview, were ready to make their voices heard. Political associations began to spring up. Labor unions grew in strength and influence. The bustling trade routes became highways not just for goods, but for powerful new ideas. They weren't just complaining about unfair taxes anymore. They were questioning the very structure of colonial authority itself. But the Luo had learned patience from the lake, a patience that was slow, deep, and incredibly persistent. This was the era that produced leaders whose names would be remembered for generations. Leaders like Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, eloquent, razor sharp, a true master of debate and metaphor. He could give a lecture to a council of elders and have them applauding, while at the same time completely dismantling a colonial officer's logic with a few well-chosen words. Then there was Tom Boyer, charming, confident, and with an incredible knack for public relations. He was always aware of the camera, even before the camera was a common sight. Aching Oneko and Ramogi Aching, to other key figures, were fearless, witty, and willing to risk imprisonment for the cause of justice. And there were others, like Arguing's Code Heck, Walter O'Deed, and O'Dara Conco thinkers and strategists, each one a vital piece of the growing political mosaic. When it came to the Mau Mau Rebellion, the Luo relationship was cautious and complex. They admired the courage of the fighters in the Central Highlands, but they also carefully measured the strategy. Nyanza's geography and its political landscape were different from the Kikuyu heartlands, and the Luo valued both honor and survival. And once again, humor became their secret weapon. At secret political meetings, a leader might crack a joke about the British generals being unable to tell a bull from a drum, even as they were making serious, life-altering plans. Wit was the constant companion of courage. By this time, political consciousness was no longer confined to the educated elite. It had spread far and wide. The people began to understand a fundamental truth. Their loyalty in the past had been forced upon them. The future, they now realized, was something they had to choose for themselves. By 1960, the air in Nairobi, in Kisumu, and in every single Luo homestead was thick with expectation. The winds of change were blowing across the continent. The Lancaster House conferences in London brought promises of self-rule, of an independent Kenya. Luo leaders were right there in the thick of it, negotiating, arguing, and yes, even laughing. They were always eloquent, always fearless. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga formed crucial alliances with Jomo Kenyatta, two powerful leaders who understood that compromise was necessary, but that cunning was absolutely essential. Independence finally arrived in 1963. It felt like the dawn breaking over the lake, bright, full of promise, and also a little terrifying. The celebrations were grand. The new Kenyan flag fluttered proudly in the breeze. Songs of freedom and hope filled the air. Would the promises made during the struggle be kept? Would the loyalty shown by so many be respected? Tom Boyer rose to become one of the brightest stars in the new Kenya. He was a master at bridging the gaps between labor unions, the youth, and national politics. He charmed the entire nation, spoke with the power of fire, and inspired confidence wherever he went. But his very brilliance, his incredible talent, drew envy and fear from those who saw him as a threat. His assassination in 1969 was a devastating blow to the Luo people. It wasn't just the loss of a great man. It was a painful reminder that politics demanded constant vigilance, humor, courage, and sometimes unimaginable heartbreak. By 1966, just a few years into independence, the Luo were no longer just a people awakening from a long slumber. They had become a formidable political force, acutely aware of the bitter taste of betrayal, fiercely proud of their identity, and ready to navigate a complex new world that demanded cunning just as much as it demanded courage. And through it all, humor, always humor, remained their shield. An old Luo elder, speaking to a visiting government official, might murmur with a knowing smile, "We welcomed you into our homes with tea and debate. But remember, the fish in our lake see everything, and so do we." Stay with us as the story of the Luo people continues in the next part. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more.